a billionaire accidentally saw a little girl standing alone in the middle of a deserted street. When he held the paper in her hand, his heart sank. The trembling lines revealed a terrible secret that made he... The sleek hum of the engine was the only sound breaking the stillness of the forest road. The moon hung low, its pale glow spilling over a canopy of skeletal branches that twisted against the cold Chicago night sky. Henry Harper gripped the steering wheel of his custom sports car, his knuckles pale beneath the soft glow of the dashboard. The leather seat beneath him groaned softly as he shifted, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. It had been a long evening, one packed with strategic presentations, firm handshakes, and the perfunctory smiles of people who spoke in percentages and margins. Success hung on Henry like the tailored jacket discarded in the back seat. Expensive, well-fitted, but suffocating. He navigated the quiet curves of the empty road, his thoughts veering toward the gnawing void of solitude he could never quite shake. Then he saw her. A small figure, pale and still, stood just off the shoulder of the road. Henry blinked and instinctively tapped the brakes. The headlights swept forward, illuminating a girl, no older than 10, dressed in a thin, oversized hoodie that swallowed her small frame. Her hair clung to her dirt-streaked cheeks, and her hands were clenched tight against her chest. She didn't flinch under the harsh glare. She just stood there, trembling. Her eyes locked on the car. Henry's stomach tightened. He coasted to a stop a few yards ahead. The soft crunch of gravel, the only sound against the restless murmur of wind. His grip on the steering wheel tightened as he debated his next move. He was a man of calculation, a man who always thought in terms of risks and returns. Stopping for a stranger on an empty road in the dead of night. It was an illogical gamble, but her eyes, wide, terrified and pleading, cut through him. He cursed under his breath, shoved the gear into park, and stepped out, the crisp air biting at his face. "Are you okay?" His voice was steady, deliberate, but she didn't respond. She just stared, her chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. He took a cautious step closer, hands open at his sides, his tailored shoes crunching softly against the gravel. "I'm not going to hurt you." "Do you need help?" Still nothing. Her silence was more unsettling than any scream would have been. She hesitated, her feet shifting against the dirt, then extended a small hand toward him. A crumpled piece of paper dangled from her fingers, trembling in the cold. Henry hesitated, his sharp mind already calculating scenarios he didn't want to entertain. But something, maybe the ghost of an old conscience, urged him forward. He took the paper, his fingers brushing hers briefly. She flinched, but didn't pull away. The note was worn, its edges soft from too many folds. He unfolded it slowly, the faint scent of earth and dampness wafting upward. "Please help Lisa. Get her to the treehouse before midnight. They're coming for her." The handwriting was shaky, uneven, as though written in a desperate rush. A faint smear of ink obscured part of the message, but the urgency was unmistakable. Henry's brow furrowed as he read the words again, his pulse quickening. He glanced back at the girl. Lisa, he assumed, and saw her watching him, her eyes dark pools of fear and expectation. "Who's they?" he asked, his voice lower, quieter now. She didn't answer, just pressed her lips together and wrapped her arms tighter around herself. Henry exhaled sharply, his breath clouding in the frigid air. The rational part of him screamed to walk away, to get back into his car and drive until the warmth of his penthouse drowned out the memory of this eerie encounter. But the rational part of him didn't win. "All right," he said finally, his tone firmer. "Get in the car." She hesitated, her small frame taut with uncertainty. Henry stepped back and gestured toward the passenger side, his movements deliberate, patient. After a long moment, she shuffled forward, climbing into the car with hesitant, jerky movements. He watched her settle into the seat, her hands gripping the edge of the leather as though it might disappear beneath her. Henry slid into the driver's seat, closing the door with a solid thunk. The note lay crumpled in his lap as he started the engine. The car purred to life, a low, steady sound that filled the silence between them. He glanced at Lisa in the rearview mirror, noting the way she stared out the window, her body coiled like a spring. "Where is this treehouse?" he asked, keeping his voice even. She raised a trembling hand and pointed down the road, her eyes never leaving the dark stretch of trees. Henry nodded, gripping the wheel tighter as he shifted into gear. As the car accelerated, the forest engulfed them completely. Behind them, distant but growing louder, came the unmistakable hum of another engine. The car cut through the darkness like a blade, its sleek headlights slicing a path through the dense forest road. Branches, gnarled and bare, twisted against the moonlight, casting long, skeletal shadows over the pavement. Inside, the hum of the engine was the only sound, steady and low, a heartbeat in the silence. Henry Harper glanced at Lisa. She sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her small frame dwarfed by the plush leather, her hands gripping the seatbelt as if it might pull her to safety. She hadn't spoken a word since they left the roadside. Every attempt to engage her, questions, reassurances, met only with her wide, unblinking gaze and the faint tremble of her hands. "Do you want to tell me where we're going?" Henry asked again, his voice measured, almost clinical. It was the tone he used in boardrooms when negotiations stalled. "The treehouse. Is it close?" Lisa didn't respond. Instead, her eyes darted to the window, following the skeletal fingers of trees that loomed closer as the road narrowed. She flinched as distant headlights flickered briefly through the trees before disappearing into the shadows. Henry tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles pale in the dim light. He wasn't a man who indulged in reckless decisions, yet here he was, following cryptic instructions on a scrap of paper, driving into a forest with a terrified girl who wouldn't or couldn't speak. It didn't make sense, but something about her, the desperation etched into her every movement, kept him going. The road curved sharply, the forest pressing closer, its darkness thick and oppressive. Henry adjusted the car's headlights, their beams slicing wider to illuminate the encroaching trees. Lisa let out a tiny, involuntary gasp, shrinking further into her seat. "It's all right," he said, glancing at her. "Just a sharp turn." She didn't respond, but her shoulders relaxed a fraction. Henry's gaze flicked to the rearview mirror out of habit, and froze. A pair of headlights had appeared behind them, faint but deliberate. The vehicle was distant, but its movements were unmistakable. It mirrored every turn, every adjustment of speed. Henry's jaw tightened. "We're being followed," he muttered, more to himself than to Lisa. She stiffened immediately, her breath quickening, hands clutching the seatbelt tighter. Her reaction confirmed what he already suspected. This wasn't a coincidence. The SUV behind them drew closer, its headlights lingering ominously in the mirror. Henry's mind shifted into focus, years of calculated decision-making taking over. He tapped a control on the dashboard, activating the car's night vision display. The screen illuminated with a grainy, infrared view of the road behind him, a large, dark vehicle with tinted windows. It was impossible to see who was inside. "Hold on," he said quietly. He gently depressed the accelerator, allowing the car to decelerate just enough to assess the SUV's reaction. It slowed too, maintaining its distance but refusing to overtake. Henry's heartbeat quickened, yet he maintained his composure on the outside. He pressed another button, and the car's advanced GPS interface lit up. The map showed the winding forest road ahead, with no intersections or clear turn-offs for miles. If he was going to lose them, he'd have to get creative. The SUV's headlights surged closer, as if sensing his hesitation. Henry inhaled sharply and gripped the wheel. "Lisa," he said, his voice low but firm, "stay calm and do exactly what I say." She nodded, her eyes wide and glassy. Henry shifted gears, the car responding instantly with a surge of power. He accelerated sharply, the engine's growl echoing against the trees. The SUV followed suit, its headlights now glaring in the mirror. The narrow road twisted like a coiled snake, each turn sharper than the last. Henry guided the car with precision, his eyes darting between the windshield and the navigation display. He used every tool at his disposal, infrared, GPS, even the car's adaptive steering, to maintain control at high speed. The SUV stayed close, its engine roaring in pursuit, but Henry wasn't out of options yet. Spotting a sharp bend ahead, he slowed abruptly, then cut the wheel hard to the left, steering the car down a narrow, overgrown path, barely visible in the moonlight. The tires bit into the dirt, sending up a spray of gravel as they veered off the main road. The forest appeared to pause momentarily. The headlights behind them hesitated, overshooting the turn. Henry pressed the accelerator, weaving through the narrow path, branches scraping the sides of the car. His night vision display guided him forward, the dense forest flashing by in a blur. Minutes passed like hours, the tension coiling tighter with every second. Finally, Henry slowed the car and turned off the lights, letting the darkness swallow them. He killed the engine, the sudden silence deafening. Lisa's breathing was shallow, her hands trembling in her lap. Henry placed a hand on the gear shift, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. For long, agonizing moments, there was nothing but stillness. Then, faintly, the sound of the SUV's engine roared past in the distance, continuing down the main road. Henry exhaled slowly, leaning back against the seat. "We lost them," he said quietly, more to himself than to Lisa. Her eyes flicked to his, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of something other than fear. Trust. The car idled briefly at the edge of the clearing, its soft rumble breaking the unnatural silence of the forest. Henry Harper leaned forward, peering into the dark expanse ahead. In the dim glow of the headlights, the outline of a structure began to take shape. A treehouse, nestled high among the dense canopy. The weathered wood blended with the bark of the trees, making it almost invisible against the night. It was no child's plaything. This was a refuge, rugged and concealed, worn rope swaying gently in the cold breeze. Henry cut the engine. The sudden silence left only the soft rustle of leaves and Lisa's shallow breathing beside him. "We're here," he said, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper. He glanced at Lisa, her small hands still clutching the seatbelt. "Do you recognize this place?" She didn't respond, but unfastened her seatbelt, her movements hesitant yet purposeful. Henry watched as she slipped out of the car and onto the damp forest floor, her sneakers crunching against the pine needles. He followed, his breath misting in the chilled air. The clearing was smaller than he expected, boxed in by towering oaks and a latticework of shadows cast by the moonlight. The treehouse loomed above, its weather-beaten boards streaked with moss and age. Beneath it, old remnants of another time lay scattered. Rusted toys, a broken slingshot, a deflated soccer ball tangled in the undergrowth. It was clear someone had once lived or played here, though now it bore the weight of abandonment. Lisa stood motionless at the base of the tree, her gaze fixed upward. Then, without warning, a shadow moved within the structure above. Henry's instincts flared, and he reached for her shoulder, pulling her gently behind him. "Who's there?" His voice was sharp, commanding, but not unkind. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of creaking wood. Then, the shadow materialized into a figure, a man tall and lean, his scruffy beard catching the faint light as he descended the makeshift ladder with practiced ease. His clothes were worn, his eyes sharp, scanning Henry with open suspicion. "Jason," Lisa whispered, breaking free from Henry's grasp. Her voice was small but steady, and she ran to the man, wrapping her arms around his waist. Jason's expression softened immediately, his hand resting protectively on her head. "You're okay," Jason murmured, his voice rough but gentle. "You're safe." Henry stood back, watching the exchange, his sharp gaze taking in every detail. Jason's initial mistrust hadn't faded. His posture remained defensive, his eyes darting to Henry. "Who's this?" Jason asked, his voice hardening as he gestured toward Henry. "Someone who's kept her alive," Henry said evenly, folding his arms. "She handed me a note. It led us here." Jason's jaw tightened. He crouched to Lisa's level, gently tilting her chin up to examine her face. "Did they hurt you?" he asked softly. She shook her head, and he exhaled, relief flooding his features. "I didn't know who else to trust," Jason said, rising to face Henry, though his tone remained guarded. "She's been through enough. So have I." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Maybe you should start with what's going on." Jason hesitated, his gaze flicking between Lisa and the treehouse, as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he stepped back, motioning toward the rickety ladder. "Come inside. It's not safe to stand out here." The interior of the treehouse was dimly lit, a single lantern casting faint shadows on the wooden walls. Piles of blankets and a battered backpack sat in the corner. Jason moved toward a small crate, pulling out a folder stuffed with papers. "This is why we're running," Jason said, placing the folder on the makeshift table. He opened it to reveal a collection of photographs, financial records, and handwritten notes. "Gabriel Trujillo. Does that name mean anything to you?" Henry's breath hitched. His eyes darted over the documents, bank statements tied to shell companies, photographs of children in shadowy warehouses, and signatures he recognized all too well. "He's one of my former partners," Henry said slowly, the weight of the realization settling over him. His fingers hovered over a grainy photo of Trujillo, shaking hands with a man in a dark suit. "I didn't know this." Jason's jaw tightened. "He runs an international trafficking network. I was working undercover to expose him, but they found out. Lisa became a target because of me." Henry met Jason's eyes. "And these?" He gestured to the documents. Jason nodded. "It's everything I've got. Enough to take him down if we can get it to someone who'll listen." Henry leaned back, his mind racing. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was darker than he could have imagined. He glanced at Lisa, now curled up on a pile of blankets, her small frame shivering despite the warmth of the treehouse. The weight of responsibility pressed against his chest. He didn't fully understand why yet, but he knew one thing. Walking away wasn't an option anymore. "We'll figure this out," Henry said quietly, his gaze fixed on the incriminating papers. "But first, we need to get you both somewhere safe." Jason hesitated, then nodded. For the first time, his expression softened. Not trust, not yet, but something close. Outside, the forest rustled softly, the distant howl of wind a reminder that danger still lurked in the shadows. The wind whistled through the branches, carrying a faint chill that gnawed at Henry's composure. Inside the treehouse, the lantern flickered weakly, casting long, jagged shadows across the wooden walls. Jason rifled through the papers on the makeshift table, his movements sharp, his eyes darting to Lisa every few moments, as if reassuring himself she was still there. Henry stood near the doorway, his body a study in controlled tension, ears attuned to the faintest sound outside. A distant crunch of gravel snapped them all to attention. Jason froze, his hand gripping the edge of the table. Lisa, curled up on the blankets, sat upright, her wide eyes darting to Henry. He raised a hand, motioning for silence. The sound came again, closer this time. The unmistakable low growl of engines weaving through the trees. "They're here," Jason hissed, his voice low but taut with urgency. He moved quickly to the window, peering out through a crack in the wooden boards. "It's not just one vehicle. There are at least 3. Henry didn't need to look to confirm. He could feel the pressure of the approaching threat, the way the air seemed to contract with their arrival. He turned to Jason, his voice calm but firm. "Do you have a plan?" Jason's jaw clenched. "I've been playing defense for weeks. Never had the numbers to fight back." "Then we need to think differently." Henry's mind worked swiftly, weighing their options. "We can't stay here. They'll surround us." Jason nodded reluctantly, already moving to gather the documents into a waterproof bag. "Lisa," he called, his voice softening as he crouched beside her. "You're going with Henry, okay? Stay in his car. Don't come out for anything." Lisa's lower lip quivered, but she nodded, her hands clutching Jason's sleeve. "What about you?" she whispered. Jason glanced at Henry, his expression steeling. "I'll buy you time." "No." Henry stepped forward, his tone cutting through the growing panic. "We're all getting out of here. Together." A sudden flash of headlights pierced through the treehouse slats, washing the interior in harsh light. The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the clearing, followed by the muffled voices of men calling out in clipped, authoritative tones. Henry moved fast. "Lisa, come with me. Now." He gestured sharply for Jason to follow as he descended the ladder. Below, his car sat gleaming in the moonlight, its features a testament to cutting-edge technology and efficiency. Henry had never expected to rely on it for survival. But tonight, it would prove its worth. Lisa climbed down shakily, her small frame slipping into the passenger seat without protest. Jason joined her, sliding into the back seat with the bag of evidence cradled against his chest. Henry settled behind the wheel, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. From the shadows of the clearing, figures began to emerge, dark shapes carrying weapons, their movements deliberate as they approached the treehouse. "They'll be on us in seconds," Jason muttered, leaning forward. "We need to move." Henry didn't respond. His foot pressed the accelerator, and the car surged forward, its tires spitting gravel as it cut through the forest. Behind them, shouts erupted, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. "Hold on," Henry said tersely, activating the car's adaptive systems. The night vision display flared to life, illuminating the dense forest with eerie precision. He weaved through the trees with calculated skill, the car responding seamlessly to his commands. The attackers weren't far behind. Headlights danced erratically in the rearview mirror as the SUVs tore through the undergrowth, their engines roaring like predators closing in on prey. Jason twisted in his seat, his expression grim. "They're gaining." "Not for long," Henry replied. With a flick of his wrist, he engaged the car's defense protocols. A cloud of metallic chaff burst from the rear, scattering into the air and disorienting the pursuing vehicles. One SUV skidded violently, smashing into a tree with a deafening crunch. Lisa gasped, clutching the seatbelt as the car swerved sharply to avoid a narrow ravine. Henry kept his focus ahead, his jaw set, his movements precise. The second SUV closed the gap, its front grille looming menacingly in the mirror. Jason leaned forward. "There's a dirt path up ahead. Left turn. It's narrow, but it'll slow them down." Henry nodded, adjusting his trajectory. The car veered sharply, its tires kicking up a spray of dirt and leaves. The path meandered through the forest, with the trees encroaching on both sides. Behind them, the remaining SUVs struggled to maintain speed, their bulk ill-suited to the terrain. "Almost there," Jason urged, his knuckles white against the bag. "Keep going." Henry didn't answer, his eyes scanning the path for the next turn. Suddenly, the GPS lit up with a warning, an incline ahead, steep and treacherous. He clenched his teeth, accelerating into the climb. The car lurched, its engine growling as it clawed its way upward. The SUVs faltered, one sliding back with a screech of tires. Only one remained, its persistence unnerving. Henry pressed another control, releasing an oil slick onto the path. The SUV swerved wildly, its wheels losing traction before it careened off the edge of the incline. Silence fell as the forest swallowed the wreckage. Henry slowed the car, his grip easing on the wheel as he glanced at Lisa. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but she nodded faintly, a silent assurance that she was okay. Jason exhaled sharply from the back seat, his voice rough but steady. That was close. Henry's gaze remained on the road ahead, the tension in his shoulders finally loosening. "It's not over," he said quietly. "We've bought time, but they'll be back." Jason nodded grimly. "Then we use it wisely." As the car descended into the forest's shadowy depths, the weight of their shared mission pressed heavily on all of them. The fight wasn't finished, but for now, they had survived. The sprawling skyline of Chicago loomed ahead, its cold brilliance reflected in the polished windows of Henry Harper's car. The tension in the cabin hadn't eased, even as the chaos of the forest gave way to the concrete calm of the city. Lisa, curled into herself, sat motionless in the passenger seat. Jason's gaze flicked between the passing streets and the bag of documents resting on his lap. Henry's mansion came into view, a towering structure of sleek glass and steel nestled in an exclusive district. Its modern architecture exuded power, but beneath the sharp edges and meticulously landscaped surroundings, there was a distinct lack of warmth. The automated gates slid open silently, and the car eased into the underground garage. The silence persisted as the trio exited the vehicle. Lisa clung to Jason's side, her small hand gripping his sleeve tightly. Jason glanced around, taking in the pristine sterility of their surroundings. The garage was immaculate, the floor polished to a mirror-like sheen. Beside Henry's car sat an array of vehicles, each more expensive than the last, but their perfection felt almost clinical, as though they were more for show than use. "Come on," Henry said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We'll be safe here." The elevator ride to the main floor was suffocating in its quietness. When the doors slid open, Jason let out a low whistle. The mansion's interior was a testament to Henry's wealth. High ceilings, sleek furniture, and panoramic windows offering breathtaking views of the city below. Yet, the space felt strangely impersonal. There were no family photos, no signs of life beyond the curated art pieces and strategically placed sculptures. "Nice place," Jason muttered, his voice laced with sarcasm. "You live here alone?" Henry glanced at him briefly before walking toward a control panel on the wall. "Yes," he replied curtly, entering a security sequence. The shutters on the windows closed, sealing the mansion in a protective cocoon. Lisa perched cautiously on the edge of an oversized sofa, her wide eyes darting around the room. Jason paced restlessly, the tension in his shoulders evident. Henry watched him for a moment, before crossing to a nearby cabinet and retrieving a decanter of amber liquid. "Drink?" he offered, pouring himself a glass. Jason shook his head, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I don't need a drink. I need a plan." His voice cracked slightly, and he turned to Lisa. "She needs to be safe, Henry, and right now, I don't even know what safe means anymore." Henry sipped his drink, his gaze steady. She's safe here. You both are. Jason's pacing quickened. You don't understand. I failed her, okay? I was supposed to protect her, and instead, she's been running for her life because of me. Lisa flinched at his words, her head bowing slightly. Henry's expression softened, and he placed the glass on a nearby table. Jason, he said evenly, you're here now. That's what matters. Jason let out a bitter laugh. You don't get it. I was supposed to stop Trujillo before it got this bad. Before he stopped, his hands balling into fists. I've been chasing him for a long time, and all I've got is that damn bag of papers. And now, Lisa's in the crossfire because I couldn't finish the job. You can't do this alone, Henry said firmly. No one can. Jason turned to face him, his frustration evident. And what do you suggest? You think money and connections will fix this? You think Trujillo will care if you throw a few lawyers at him? Henry's expression didn't waver. What I think, he said slowly, is that Trujillo isn't invincible. You have information he doesn't want anyone to see. I have the means to expose him. Together, we can end this. Jason's gaze hardened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he dropped into a chair, his hands cradling his head. If we screw this up... His voice trailed off. Henry approached, his tone softer now. We won't. But first, we need a plan. I'll contact some people I trust, people who can help us dig deeper into Trujillo's network. Jason nodded reluctantly, his exhaustion evident. Lisa had fallen asleep on the sofa, her small frame curled up like a cat. Jason glanced at her, his expression softening. She's been through so much, he murmured. She deserves better than this. Henry followed his gaze. We'll make sure she gets it. For a moment, the room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the city beyond the shutters. Henry crossed to a desk, pulling up a holographic display. The screens flickered to life, each one displaying information, financial reports, property records, and connections tied to Trujillo's operations. Jason leaned forward, his interest piqued despite his fatigue. You're really doing this? Henry didn't look up. I've spent years building this empire. I think it's time I used it for something that matters. Jason studied him, the mistrust in his eyes giving way to something closer to respect. All right, he said quietly. Let's take him down. As the first rays of dawn crept through the edges of the shutters, the mansion seemed to transform, not warmer, but charged with purpose. For the first time in years, Henry Harper felt a sense of resolve that went beyond business deals and balance sheets. This fight was personal now, and he wasn't backing down. Gabriel Trujillo leaned back in his leather chair, a glass of whiskey resting untouched on the polished mahogany desk before him. The skyline of Chicago stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, a sprawling testament to his control. Every tower, every light blinking in the distance, seemed to pulse with his influence. To the outside world, he was a legitimate businessman, a philanthropist funding education initiatives and urban development. But beneath the veneer lay a web of shadows, a trafficking empire that had made him untouchable. A sharp knock broke the silence. Gabriel didn't turn. Come in. A man entered, his steps measured but heavy, betraying his unease. Dressed in a tailored suit that seemed ill-fitted for his bulky frame, the man stood by the desk, hands clasped tightly. Sir, he began, his voice low, we've confirmed it. Jason and the girl are in Chicago. Gabriel's lips curved into a slow smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. And Henry Harper? The man hesitated, his hesitation a dangerous misstep. Gabriel's smile faded, replaced by an expression as cold as the cityscape behind him. Speak. He's involved, the man admitted. They're staying at his mansion. Our team tried to intercept them last night, but Harper's car was difficult. Difficult? Gabriel reiterated his question, his tone gentle yet razor-sharp. He stood, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the room. Henry Harper is a man of wealth, not war. Yet he evades you. The man shifted uncomfortably. His car is equipped with advanced tech, military-grade defenses. We didn't anticipate— You didn't anticipate, Gabriel interrupted, his tone venomous. And now he's harboring a man who has what I cannot allow to exist. Tell me, why am I still paying you? The man swallowed hard, his face pale. We'll handle it, sir. Tonight. His mansion? Gabriel raised a hand, silencing him. He turned to face the window, his reflection blending with the city lights. Henry Harper is no fool. He adheres to his own set of rules. If he's chosen to protect Jason and the girl, then he believes he can win. That arrogance will be his undoing. He turned back, his eyes gleaming with cold resolve. Send a team, make it clean, no mistakes. The man nodded quickly, retreating from the room like a shadow, fleeing the light. Hours later, Henry's mansion. The mansion was eerily silent. The lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the modern furnishings. Henry sat at his desk, his focus split between the holographic displays flickering with data and the growing tension pressing against his temples. Jason stood nearby, arms crossed, his restless energy palpable. Lisa was asleep again, curled up on the sofa, her small form barely rising with each breath. Jason broke the silence. How long before Trujillo comes after us here? Henry didn't look up. Not long. Jason exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. We need to move. This place is a target. This place, Henry said evenly, is fortified. You move her now, and we lose every advantage we have. Jason opened his mouth to argue, but a soft chime interrupted him. Henry's eyes narrowed, and he tapped a panel on his desk. A live feed from the mansion's perimeter appeared, a group of dark-clad figures moving with precision, their weapons glinting faintly in the security camera's night vision. They're here, Henry said, his voice calm but clipped. He rose swiftly, gesturing for Jason. Get Lisa. Secure her in the panic room. Jason hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded, scooping Lisa into his arms. She stirred briefly, but didn't wake. Where do I go? Hallway, left door. Keypad code is 8173, Henry replied as he crossed to another panel and activated the mansion's defense systems. The perimeter lights flared to life, flooding the grounds with harsh illumination. Hidden barriers rose from the ground, blocking entry points. Alarms blared, piercing the night. The intruders adjusted quickly, their movements methodical. Two split off, attempting to disable the cameras, while the others pressed forward. Henry kept a close watch on their progress, his fingers swiftly maneuvering through the controls. They're professionals, Jason said, reappearing, his jaw tight. Trujillo's best. Good, Henry said grimly. Then they'll know when they've lost. One of the intruders reached the main entrance, only to trigger a concealed stun system. The man dropped instantly, convulsing as electricity coursed through him. His companions hesitated, recalibrating their approach. Jason watched, his fists clenching. They won't back off. They don't have to, Henry replied, activating another defense. Automated drones emerged from concealed panels, their cameras locking onto the remaining intruders. A burst of non-lethal rounds forced the attackers to retreat, regrouping near the perimeter wall. One of the drones went offline abruptly, its feed replaced by static. Henry frowned, his fingers pausing briefly. They're adapting. Then let's stop playing defense, Jason growled. He grabbed a tactical baton from a nearby cabinet, spinning it expertly. Let me handle this. Henry hesitated, then nodded. Take the west wing. Don't engage unless necessary." Jason disappeared into the shadows, his movements silent but deliberate. Henry returned his focus to the monitors, tracking the intruders' positions. One by one, they were neutralized, not killed, but incapacitated with precision. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the last figure stumbled back toward the outer gate, clutching his arm. The lights dimmed, the alarms silenced, and the mansion returned to its quiet vigilance. Jason reappeared, his baton streaked with scratches, but his expression unyielding. "That all of them?" "For now," Henry said, leaning back against the desk. His gaze drifted to the monitors, then to Lisa's door. "They'll come back. Stronger." Jason nodded, his respect for Henry unspoken but clear. "Then we'll be ready." Henry glanced at him, his voice firm. "Together." For the first time, Jason didn't argue. Together. The bond between them was no longer tenuous. It was forged in fire, a unity born of survival and necessity, and it would be tested again, sooner than either of them expected. Working in groups can be fun and frustrating at times. What about you? Do you prefer working alone or with others? If you prefer to solve problems on your own, leave a comment saying, "Gummy candy." But if you prefer to figure things out together, leave a comment saying, "Hard candy." The soft glow of Henry's office illuminated the tension etched across Jason's face as he hunched over the desk, his fingers moving deftly across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled down the screen, intricate and endless, a digital tapestry that held the potential to dismantle Gabriel Trujillo's empire. The room was quiet, except for the rhythmic clicking of keys and the faint hum of the mansion's security systems in the background. Henry stood nearby, his arms crossed, watching Jason work. His sharp, calculating eyes darted between the screen and Jason's furrowed brow. He admired the younger man's focus, the way he navigated the labyrinth of firewalls and encrypted data like a surgeon, precise and relentless. Jason didn't look up. "This isn't just a simple hack," he muttered. "Trujillo's smart. He's using shell companies, offshore accounts and layers of proxies. Even if I crack this, there's no guarantee I can tie it back to him." "Keep digging," Henry said, his voice calm but firm. "If there's a trail, we'll find it." Jason exhaled sharply, his fingers pausing briefly over the keys. "It's not just finding it. It's not getting caught. I'm piggybacking off a dormant server he uses. But if anyone's monitoring it—" "They won't," Henry interjected, his confidence absolute. "Not before you're done." Jason nodded, but the doubt lingered in his eyes. He returned to his work, his focus narrowing as he bypassed another firewall. Each line of code was a step deeper into dangerous territory, and the stakes pressed heavily against him. Suddenly, the screen flickered. Jason's hands froze. A warning flashed in red. "Connection detected. Possible breach." "Damn it!" Jason hissed, his fingers flying across the keyboard in a desperate attempt to stay undetected. "They're onto me!" Henry stepped forward, his voice steady. "What do you need?" "Time," Jason snapped, sweat beading on his forehead. "And quiet." Henry moved back, his presence solid but unintrusive. Jason typed furiously, his movements a blur. The seconds stretched unbearably long, the room's silence now thick with tension. Finally, the red warning disappeared, replaced by a scrolling list of financial transactions. Jason exhaled, his shoulders sagging. "Got it," he muttered, his tone laced with disbelief. "Bank accounts, dummy corporations. Everything." Henry moved closer, his eyes scanning the screen. "Good. Download it all." Jason didn't need to be told twice. He inserted a flash drive and began extracting the files. His hands were steady, but his mind raced. Each transaction on the screen was another piece of the puzzle, a glimpse into the machinery that powered Trujillo's operation. The download completed with a soft chime. Jason pulled the drive, his hand trembling slightly. "This is enough to bury him," he said, turning to Henry. "But we need more. Proof that it's him behind all of this." Henry nodded, already considering the next step. "I'll handle that." Jason frowned. "How?" Henry's expression was unreadable, his tone deliberate. "I'll talk to him." Jason stared at him, incredulous. "Are you insane? The moment he sees you, he'll know you're working against him." "Or," Henry countered, "he'll think I'm looking for a way back in. Trujillo doesn't trust anyone, but he respects power. If I make him believe I'm still useful, he'll let me close enough to find what we need." Jason shook his head, pacing the room. "This isn't some boardroom negotiation. He's a killer, Henry. He doesn't just cut ties, he burns them." Henry watched him calmly. "I've been in the same room with men like Trujillo before. You don't win by running. You win by knowing their weaknesses and using them. If I can gain his trust, I can buy us the time we need to finish this." Jason stopped pacing, his frustration evident. "And what if he sees through it? What if he decides to make an example of you?" Henry's gaze was unwavering. "Then I'll make sure he regrets it." For a moment, neither man spoke. The plan's weight hovered between them, a delicate thread that could lead to either victory or disaster. Finally, Jason relented, though his unease was palpable. "You're not going in blind. We use this," he said, holding up the flash drive. "You keep him on edge. Make him think you know more than you do." Henry nodded. "That's the idea." Jason's jaw tightened. "I still don't like it." "You don't have to," Henry said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You just have to trust me." Jason studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine. But if this goes south, I'm coming in after you." Henry allowed himself a small smile. "I'd expect nothing less." The tension eased slightly, though the gravity of their plan loomed large. As Jason secured the drive, Henry turned to the window, his reflection merging with the city lights. Gabriel Trujillo would never see it coming. That evening, Henry adjusted his cufflinks in the dim light of the mansion's living room, his reflection faintly visible in the large windows. The calm he projected was a stark contrast to the brewing storm within. The plan was reckless, but necessary. He had spent years building a life of control and calculation. This was the first time he was willingly stepping into chaos. Behind him, the soft patter of feet broke his concentration. He turned to see Lisa standing in the doorway, her small frame dwarfed by the heavy shadows. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Lisa," Henry said gently, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. "Shouldn't you be resting?" Instead of answering, she moved closer. Her small hands reached out, gripping his larger one with surprising strength. Her head tilted up, revealing tearful eyes that made Henry's heart tighten. "Please don't go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've already lost my mum and dad. I only have Jason now. And you." Henry felt the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. He didn't know when he had become part of her fragile world, but the realization both humbled and terrified him. "Lisa," he said softly, his free hand resting over hers. "I have to do this. To protect you, Jason. To end this." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But what if you don't come back? What if—" Her voice broke and she tightened her grip. "You have to come back. Promise me." Henry nodded, his voice steady, but filled with a quiet resolve. "I promise, Lisa. I'll come back." She studied his face for a long moment, then finally nodded, releasing his hand. As Henry walked out the door, her whispered plea followed him like a prayer. Please come back. The grand gates of Gabriel Trujillo's estate loomed ahead, a twisted fusion of elegance and menace. Henry's sleek black car glided past the armed guards with practiced ease, their stony expressions betraying no hint of recognition. Beyond the gates, the mansion came into view, a sprawling marvel of opulence. White marble columns framed the entrance, while crystal chandeliers glittered through towering windows. Perfectly manicured gardens sprawled on either side, their beauty almost suffocating in its precision. Henry stepped out of the car, his every movement deliberate, his tailored suit impeccable. The bustle of the gala filled his ears with the sound of clinking glasses, muted laughter, and the low murmur of conversations on the verge of false civility. He adjusted his cufflinks, his expression calm, though his pulse quickened beneath the surface. A valet approached, bowing slightly. "Mr. Harper, welcome. Mr. Trujillo is expecting you." "Of course he is," Henry replied smoothly, handing over his keys. He ascended the grand staircase leading into the mansion, each step a calculated move in the dangerous game unfolding tonight. Inside, the air was thick with wealth and power. Guests draped in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos floated through the ballroom, their smiles practiced, their laughter hollow. A string quartet played in the corner, the delicate strains of music weaving through the room like a subtle wanang. Henry scanned the space, his sharp eyes noting the subtle signs of security. Earpieces tucked discreetly behind polished hairstyles, the way certain guests' movements were just a bit too calculated. Gabriel Trujillo stood near the center of the room, a king surveying his kingdom. His dark suit was immaculately tailored, his every gesture exuding effortless authority. As Henry approached, Gabriel's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Henry Harper," Gabriel said, his voice smooth and rich, as if every word was meant to disarm. "It's been too long." "Far too long," Henry replied, extending a hand. Their handshake was firm, a subtle battle for dominance. "Thank you for the invitation." Gabriel's eyes flicked over him, assessing. "I wasn't sure if you'd accept. After all, you've been quiet lately." Henry smiled, a mask of confidence. "Sometimes silence is necessary, but I've been keeping busy. New ventures, new opportunities." Gabriel tilted his head, his curiosity sharpened. "Opportunities, you say? Perhaps we'll discuss those later." The conversation was cut short by a server offering champagne. Henry accepted a glass, though he barely sipped it. His attention remained on Gabriel, whose charm flowed seamlessly from one guest to the next. Beneath the surface, however, was a predator, watchful, calculating, dangerous. Hours passed, the night a careful dance of subtle interrogations and veiled threats. Henry moved through the crowd with precision, each interaction calculated to blend in while positioning himself closer to Gabriel's inner circle. He noted everything, snippets of conversation, fleeting glances exchanged between security personnel, the way Gabriel's demeanor shifted ever so slightly when certain names were mentioned. At last, his chance came. Gabriel invited him into a smaller private lounge, a room lined with dark wood paneling and leather chairs, its ambiance intimate, yet suffocating. A decanter of whiskey sat on a low table, the amber liquid catching the firelight. "To old alliances," Gabriel said, pouring them both a glass. Henry raised his glass, his smile unyielding. "And new beginnings." They talked, the conversation veering into shared anecdotes of business triumphs and challenges. Gabriel's guard lowered just enough for Henry to plant seeds of trust, steering the discussion toward potential collaborations. When the time was right, Henry introduced a carefully rehearsed proposition, a facade designed to bait Gabriel into revealing more. "You've built something incredible here," Henry said, his tone casual but laced with admiration. "But I can't help but wonder, what's next?" Surely you're not content with just this." Gabriel's gaze sharpened, his smile twisting into something darker. "Contentment is for the complacent. I prefer ambition." "And ambition," Henry pressed, "requires partnerships, the kind that understand discretion." The words hung in the air, a lure Henry hoped would be enough. Gabriel's laugh was soft but cold. Discretion, a rare commodity these days. Henry leaned back, taking a calculated sip of his whiskey. "Rarer than you think." Gabriel's smile faltered, just slightly. "You've always been an enigma, Henry. I've yet to decide if that's a strength or a weakness." Before Henry could respond, the door opened abruptly. One of Gabriel's security men stepped in, leaning close to whisper something in his ear. Gabriel's expression darkened, suspicion flickering in his eyes as he looked back at Henry. "I'm afraid I must cut our conversation short," Gabriel said, his tone still polite but edged with steel. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." Henry stood, forcing an easy smile. "Of course. Another time." As he exited the lounge, his pulse quickened. Gabriel's mask had slipped, just enough to expose the cracks beneath. But Henry knew the game had shifted. The confrontation was coming, and it would be deadly. The soft hum of muffled music faded as Gabriel's man escorted Henry back toward the private lounge. The tension in the air was palpable, tightening like a noose. Henry's face remained unreadable, every step calculated to exude confidence. Inside the lounge, Gabriel Trujillo stood by the bar, his silhouette sharp against the warm glow of the whiskey decanter. The door clicked shut behind Henry, and the room seemed to shrink, the heavy scent of leather and aged liquor stifling. Gabriel turned, his smile stripped of any warmth. "You know," Gabriel began, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, "I've always prided myself on recognizing loyalty, and its absence." Henry met his gaze evenly. "I hope I haven't given you reason to doubt mine." Gabriel chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Oh, you haven't. Not directly. But loyalty, Henry, it's a fragile thing, easily swayed by greed, fear, or conscience." Henry remained silent, his mind racing. He couldn't let Gabriel dictate the pace of the conversation. "You've been busy," Gabriel continued, his voice soft but cutting. "Associating with Jason and that girl, harboring them in your fortress of glass. You must think you're clever." Henry's pulse quickened, but his expression didn't waver. "I've always believed in protecting my interests, Gabriel. If they're useful to me, I'll use them. Isn't that what you do?" Gabriel's eyes narrowed, his smile sharpening. "Perhaps. But then, I wouldn't let my pawns lead me into traps." A sharp knock at the door interrupted the charged silence. Gabriel motioned toward it, and two armed men entered, their faces grim. One carried a sleek tablet, its screen displaying security footage of Henry's car, and Jason slipping into the estate grounds. "Looks like we have uninvited guests," Gabriel said, his tone dripping with mock amusement. His gaze returned to Henry, colder now. "You brought them here, didn't you?" Henry remained calm, though his mind scrambled for an out. "If you think I'd jeopardize our arrangement—" "Enough!" Gabriel slammed his glass onto the bar, the crystal shattering. His voice rose, raw with fury. "You think I don't see through you? You think I don't know why you're here?" Henry didn't flinch. "Then kill me, Gabriel, but you'll lose more than you gain." Gabriel stepped closer, the barrel of a sleek pistol suddenly in his hand, aimed squarely at Henry's chest. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't." The door burst open before Henry could reply. Jason barreled into the room, a blur of controlled fury. His baton struck the nearest guard in the ribs, dropping him instantly. The second man spun, but Jason was faster, disarming him with a calculated strike and sending him sprawling. "Move!" Jason barked at Henry, positioning himself between him and Gabriel. Gabriel's expression twisted into rage. "You think this changes anything?" He raised his pistol, but Henry seized the opportunity, lunging forward. He grabbed Gabriel's wrist, twisting it sharply. The gun clattered to the floor as Jason closed the gap, pinning Gabriel against the bar. "Henry, the guards," Jason warned, his voice strained. Outside, alarms blared, Gabriel's men rallying. But in the distance, another sound rose, faint at first, but growing louder, the wail of approaching sirens. Outside the estate, Lisa sat trembling in Henry's car, her small hands gripping the dashboard as the chaos unfolded. She had begged Jason to let her come, promising to stay in the car. But now the reality of the situation gripped her like a vice. When the alarms erupted, she acted instinctively, her fingers fumbling with Jason's phone. The call to the police had been brief and desperate. "Please, send help. Gabriel Trujillo, he's here." She watched as the estate descended into panic, dark figures rushing toward the mansion. Despite her heart pounding, she remained still, recalling Jason's warning. "Stay low, stay quiet." Gabriel fought against Jason's grip, his eyes wild with fury. "You're both dead men," he spat. "Not today," Jason shot back, tightening his hold. Henry retrieved the pistol from the floor, keeping it trained on Gabriel as footsteps thundered down the hall. "Jason, let's go." But before they could move, the room flooded with armed police officers, their weapons drawn. Gabriel's men froze, their hands slowly rising in surrender as the tension snapped like a taut wire. Lisa's voice rang out from behind the line of officers, small but steady. "They're in here." Henry turned, relief washing over him at the sight of her unharmed. Jason released Gabriel with a shove, stepping back as the officers swarmed the room. Gabriel's defiance didn't waver, even as he was cuffed. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" Henry stepped closer, his voice low and unwavering. "It's not about winning, Gabriel. It's about ending this." Gabriel's sneer faltered as he was dragged away, the weight of his empire crumbling around him. Jason exhaled heavily, his shoulders slumping. "You okay?" he asked Henry. Henry glanced at Lisa, who ran to his side, her arms wrapping tightly around him. "I am now." The three of them stood together as the sirens wailed, the first rays of dawn breaking over the shattered kingdom of Gabriel Trujillo. At the end of that month, the courtroom buzzed with a tension that no amount of murmured conversation could dissipate. Journalists from across the globe jostled for position, cameras clicking in rapid succession. The trial of Gabriel Trujillo had become an international spectacle, a moment the world had waited for, the fall of a man who had ruled an empire built on fear and exploitation. At the prosecution's table, Jason sat stiffly, his hands clasped in his lap. His sharp suit couldn't hide the toll of recent weeks, the sleepless nights, the raw memories that resurfaced at every mention of Trujillo's name. Beside him, Henry Harper exuded calm authority, his composed demeanor a stark contrast to Jason's quiet intensity. The judge called the courtroom to order, and the first witness was called. A young woman, barely in her 20s, took the stand. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone, her voice wavering as she recounted the horrors she had endured under Trujillo's network. Every detail, every crack in her voice pierced through the room like a blade. Some in the audience wiped away tears, others looked away, unable to face the depth of her pain. Jason's turn came next. He rose, his movements measured, and approached the stand. As he took his seat, he noticed Lisa in the gallery. She gave him a small, encouraging nod, her presence serving as a grounding force amidst the chaos. He began with a steady voice, recounting his infiltration into Trujillo's operation. He spoke of the threats, the near misses, and the moment he realized his own sister had been targeted. As he detailed their flight from danger, his voice cracked, but he pressed on. His words painted a vivid picture, one that left the courtroom silent, save for the occasional stifled sob. "Lisa," Jason said, his voice soft but firm, "is the reason I'm here today. She's the reason I fought to survive." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "And she's the reason I'll do everything in my power to ensure no one else has to endure what we did." The prosecutor nodded appreciatively as Jason stepped down, his testimony a pivotal moment in the case. Henry's turn came as the trial reached its climax. The court quieted as he took the stand, his presence commanding attention. The defense tried to rattle him, pressing him on his involvement with Trujillo in the past. But Henry remained unflappable. "I was blind," Henry admitted, his voice steady. "I saw only what Gabriel Trujillo wanted me to see. But once the truth revealed itself, there was no turning back. My wealth, my connections, they meant nothing compared to the lives at stake." He presented the evidence Jason had uncovered: financial records, coded transactions, and recordings of Trujillo's admissions. Each piece dismantled the defense's arguments, one by one. When asked why he had risked his life to confront Trujillo, Henry's response was simple: because it was the right thing to do. As Henry stepped down, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs of admiration. He had shed the image of a detached, calculating millionaire, emerging instead as a man driven by conviction. In the days that followed, more victims came forward, their testimonies weaving a damning narrative. Trujillo sat stone-faced throughout, his cold demeanor cracking only occasionally under the weight of the evidence. By the trial's end, his empire lay exposed, every layer of his deceit and cruelty laid bare for the world to see. The verdict came swiftly: guilty on all counts. As the judge read the sentence, life without parole, a ripple of relief swept through the room. For the first time in years, justice seemed not just possible, but real. Jason hugged Lisa tightly, her small arms wrapped around his neck as she whispered, "We did it." Henry stood nearby, his gaze distant but resolute. As Jason approached, he extended a hand. "This doesn't erase what happened," Jason said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But it's a start." Henry shook his hand firmly. "It's more than a start. It's a new beginning." The three of them left the courthouse together, stepping into a world forever changed by their courage. The sun shone brightly overhead, a symbol of the light that now pierced the shadows Gabriel Trujillo had cast for so long. The warmth of the sun streamed through the wide glass windows of Henry's mansion, bathing the room in golden light. It was a quiet morning, a stark contrast to the chaos and darkness that had consumed their lives just weeks before. Lisa sat cross-legged on the plush sofa, her sketchpad balanced on her knees as she carefully colored in a drawing of a sunrise. Jason leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, watching her with a soft smile. Henry entered the room, his demeanor as calm and composed as ever, though there was a new lightness to his step. In his hand was a slim folder embossed with the name Dawnlight Foundation. He placed it on the coffee table and looked at Jason and Lisa with quiet resolve. "It's official," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "The Dawnlight Foundation is ready." Jason moved to the table, picking up the folder and flipping through the pages. "A foundation," he murmured, scanning the mission statement. "Support for trafficking survivors, counseling, education, reintegration programs." Henry nodded. "We can't undo what's been done, but we can give people a chance to rebuild, to heal." Lisa looked up from her sketchpad, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. "Will it help kids like me?" Henry knelt beside her, his gaze level with hers. "Yes, Lisa. Kids like you. Adults, like the ones who testified at the trial. Everyone who needs a second chance." Jason closed the folder, setting it down carefully. "This is more than I ever expected," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Henry." Henry shook his head. "It's not about gratitude. It's about doing what's right. And I couldn't have done this without you." The three of them sat together, a rare moment of peace settling over them. The silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken gratitude and shared determination. Later that day, the inaugural press conference for the Dawnlight Foundation was held in the heart of Chicago. Henry stood at the podium, the city's iconic skyline behind him. Cameras flashed as reporters leaned forward, eager for every word. "The Dawnlight Foundation," Henry began, his voice carrying a quiet strength, "is a promise to the survivors of trafficking that they are not alone, a promise to fight for a world where this darkness no longer thrives, and a promise to honor the courage of those who dared to stand against it." The audience erupted into applause, but Henry's gaze found Jason and Lisa in the front row. Jason gave him a nod of approval, while Lisa beamed, holding a small Dawnlight pin in her hands. That evening, the three of them stood on the mansion's balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The city stretched before them, alive with possibility. Lisa held Henry's hand tightly, her small fingers wrapped around his. "Do you think things will get better now?" she asked softly. Henry looked down at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "I think we're already making it better." Jason stepped closer, his voice steady. "We've come a long way, but there's still work to do." Henry nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "And we'll do it. Together." As the first stars appeared in the sky, Lisa let out a soft laugh. "It looks like the dawn, even at night," she said, pointing to the faint glow lingering on the edge of the horizon. Henry smiled. "That's the point. No matter how dark it gets, the light always comes back." The three of them stood together, bound by their shared journey and the hope of a brighter future. The city below seemed to hum with promise, and for the first time in a long time, they felt ready to face whatever came next. Above them, the stars burned bright, a reminder that even in the darkest night, there was always light. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.